I'm sure, like me, you've experienced leadership, someone in good leadership or negative leadership. And you've wondered, how did that person become a leader or my boss or whatever it is? Well, we're going to look in this segment and take a deep dive into leadership development and how we properly look at leadership and how we ourselves can develop ourselves to become better leaders. So stay tuned. Enjoy this next episode. Hi, I'm Coach AJ. I'm a life coach and fitness coach and someone who just enjoys helping people transform their lives like you. And we're going to look in this segment on leadership and how we develop leadership in a better way. And today's title is called Quality of Leadership: Reforming How We Develop Future Leaders. And I mean reforming because I think we have got caught up in our culture of thrusting people into positions of leadership that aren't ready based off certain criteria. Many times it's criteria that's very superficial. Because of their charisma, we put them in leadership. Because of their education, we put them in leadership. Because of their time in that position, we put them in leadership. We put them in leadership for certain aspects, but we don't look at the depth. Is this person really ready for leadership? Am I really ready for leadership? And I've seen this in every organization I've been a part of. I've seen this in ministry. I've seen this in business. I've seen this in the business sector. I've seen this in the military. People who are in leadership positions, they have no business being in leadership positions. All because we promote people based off potential, which is great and all, but we don't develop their leadership skills through that. We think leadership is a certain cookie cut position that if we just teach you the certain skill, you'll get it and then you'll lead by example and you'll lead your people to success. That sometimes does work, but most of the times it does not. There's no cookie cut way in how we develop leaders. We have to develop leaders to our organizational structure. We have to develop leaders based off of their personality and based off of what they can actually provide, not just to the organization, but to the team. Because that's what a leader is. A leader helps develop their team, make their team successful. And we put people in positions of leadership that are, granted, great people that can do great things, and they're very skilled, they're very specialized, and honestly, they're probably very talented. But that's not how we honestly operate and manage good talent management. We shouldn't just put everybody who's very talented in a leadership position over people if they haven't been developed, especially. So we're going to look at, how we've honestly had this trend in society, in our culture of promoting people into leadership. And then we're going to look at a few other things. We're going to look at the current culture of leadership. We're going to look at training. How do we train leaders? What are we doing currently for training? We're going to look at identifying what good leaders look like, pruning leaders out of leadership roles, which honestly, it's a little difficult to do because once you put someone in a leadership position, it's kind of hard to reel them back. But we're going to look at how we can do that in a way that's going to be beneficial for them. And then just some basic lessons to be learned in leadership. So, first of all, let's look at current culture. The current culture is leadership is based on talent. We find talented people in our organizations and we let them, flourish with their talent and skill. But after a certain amount of time, we say, okay, you know what? You should be great for management. Go be a boss, go be a leader. And have we actually really watched them carefully and thoroughly? Do we develop their character? Do we develop their skills in how they manage people? No, we just put them in a position of power and hope for the best. We roll the dice of chance to see if this person will be a great leader. And just because they're talented, just because they're skilled, doesn't make them a great leader. And if you look again at current culture, we create leadership based off of education. In the military, most officers are officers because they have a 4-year degree. They graduate from, ROTC and college, or, they'll go to a specialized school, like they'll go to the Air Force Academy, or, the Naval Academy, they'll go to the Army, there are all these different academies for the Army and everything. They'll do all these things. They'll leave, they'll get their 4-year degree, they'll become an officer, and they're thrusted into leadership. And yes, they're given certain leadership skills in the army, but they're not taught personalized leadership skills for people and how to develop people skills. I know a lot of people who are smart, who are educated in the military, but they lack good people skills to develop their people because that's what a good leader does. They're compassionate, they have character, but they're good at developing people. Another one is leadership based off charisma. There are a lot of people who have great charisma, who are great with crowds, great with people. But you know what? There's a lot more to them than charisma. Are they people of good character? We don't ask those questions. We don't observe those things. We don't observe character. We observe a charisma and then we just say, okay, they're good to go because everybody loves them. Yes, there's a crowd of people that do, but then you thrust them into leadership where they actually have to lead people and they either fight or flight. They either fight their people, make their lives miserable, or they don't, or they're absent leaders. Yeah, they might be charismatic in certain groups, in certain situations, and environments, but overall, they're lacking in a lot of other skills. So, charisma can't be the reason why we put people into leadership. And then the current culture also is we put people into leadership positions based off of networking, based off of, oh, I know them, they're friends of my friend. Oh, we go bowling together, we play golf together. We went to school together. We went to West Point together. Those kind of things. Well, I know that guy. I know that gal. They'd be great. But really, we don't know them. We just know of them. We know of them based off of how we've interacted or how someone that knows them, but we've never asked good in-depth questions to understand or ascertain if they are good for leadership. Networking is good to get your foot in the door, but you have to develop their character to understand who they truly are and if they're going to be a good fit for your team. Are they going to develop your team? Are they going to bolster your team? Are they going to motivate your team? Are they the kind of people that are going to build the good culture, a healthy culture? Because honestly, if you just go off of these characteristics that a lot of us do in every organization, you're going to put people who are not ready to be in that position. And then I'd say one of the greatest ones we do is we put people in leadership based off of the ladder. Climbing the ladder of success. Well, I started off as the mail boy, and now I'm in this corner office of sales. And then after that, guess what? I worked my way up to this position. Okay, you worked your way up to leadership, but were you developed as a leader? Well, no, I just had these crappy leaders that I saw all the time. So guess what? Most 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to just go off of what you've experienced. I've seen this in the army too, where it's like, well, you just gotta embrace the suck. I had to embrace the suck. So guess what? I'm gonna be a terrible leader and make you embrace the suck. And that's just like, well, no, that's not a good leader. How about you learn from the mistakes of your previous leadership? I know what bad leadership looks like. I know what good leadership looks like. And I would rather weigh into being a better leader and take the good and honestly push away the negative. Because honestly, what good leaders do is they learn from both sides of what to be and what not to be as a leader. The current culture of leadership, we thrust people into those positions, we promote them, but we don't give them the necessary tools to be successful as a leader. And it's not just for them to be successful, it's for their team. Because we have to remember this, that we're not just thinking of them as the boss to be successful whenever section or organization they're a part of, but the people below them, the people that work for them, are going to experience this person as their boss, supervisor, leader. And we have to equip that person to be the most successful leader, not just for themselves or their organization, but for their team. We have to start wrapping our minds around that. Because I've seen it so many times where you'll have a very talented and skilled and smart leader, and they're stuck in their office, staring at their screen, getting tasks done. They'll pop out and task their people. They go back to their routine, go back into their little tunnel vision, and that's all they do and see. And they know nothing of their people. They don't develop them personally. They don't understand them. personably. They don't understand how their team ticks, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and how to develop that. They just kind of fire and forget in all reality. And I've seen leaders like that. They're not bad leaders, they're just absent leaders. They're not leaders who are actually motivating and pushing the team for success. Good leaders know their people. Good leaders know their team. Good leaders understand their team and understand how they tick to communicate. They're not just focused on their thing and being successful and tasking out some stuff and hoping that it's successful. They're able to differentiate, hey, I know this task works for this person because they have and possess this skill. A good leader understands it because they are interacting with their team on the regular. And I think that's a lot that's missing. We're not training people on that. And that's what we're going to look at too is training here. We train leaders to be managers, really. We don't train leaders to be personable. We don't train leaders to be empathetic. We don't train leaders to be understanding. We don't train leaders to do better talent management. We train leaders to be managers. We train leaders to be taskers. We train leaders to honestly color in the lines, stay in the lines, make sure your team stays in the lines. And we don't encourage productivity, we don't encourage creativity by doing that. We train our leaders to succeed and hit metrics and goals, but also be creative and motivate their team to utilize their skills to help benefit the team and the overall organization. We're not training on that. We train on certain skills of leadership, but we don't train on the important things of leadership. How to read the room, how to understand your team, how to ask the right questions when it comes to talent management, when it comes to developing empathy with your team members. We don't do that. We're not training those things. And my question is, why don't we? I see a lot of people in ministry that are great at being preachers, but they're not good at being pastors. I see a lot of people who are great at creating, databases and great at being organized and great at knowing their job, but that doesn't mean they should be in leadership. And I think the Army needs to work on this, especially. I see this a lot of times. People get promoted, and you wonder, how did you get to the rank you are? I've met a lot of people like that where I'm like, how did you become this NCO, this officer? I mean, you are disconnected from the organization. You're only focused on one thing that's important to you, and that's it. You're not looking at the greater breadth of everything here, which is very unfortunate and sad because that person is missing opportunity to really develop their leadership skills. But what they're doing is they're just being task saturated, task focused, and management focused. They're managing, but they're not leading. And you can be a great manager, but yet lack necessary leadership skills. I know a lot of people in the military that are great managers. I know people in business that are great managers. I know people who are great in the ministry who are great managers. They manage tasks, they manage organizational structures, they manage ideas, they manage vision, but they don't lead people. They don't encourage people. They don't motivate people to do great things within the organization. They don't help develop other leaders to be leaders either. They kind of hoard the leadership to themselves. And that's very unfortunate. So we're not training leaders correctly. But then here's the thing. We need to look at, and now that I've identified pretty much, the what's wrong with leadership, how do we see this, what our culture is like with leadership, how training is with leadership. Well, here's the so what. What do we do? How should we identify good leaders? How do we develop good leaders? How do we make leaders better? How do we make leaders better that affects the organization in such a positive way that people want to stay in the organization? I'm seeing this in the Army, especially. Retention numbers are so low in the Army. People aren't quitting the Army because of the Army, they're quitting the Army because of leadership. Because people are in positions of leadership that probably shouldn't be. They need to retire. They need to get out. They need to find a different job. That's why. They're not leaving the Army because the Army itself is toxic or bad. They're leaving bad leadership who have mistreated them, misused them, haven't considered them, who have not been empathetic to them. That's why they're leaving. So, why do we do this? Why are we looking at leaders this way? So, we're going to look again. how we identify good leaders. How do we develop better leaders so that our organizations can be healthier, so that our structure can be healthy, but that people can be satisfied and grow and develop as well. That way we can stop this trend of negative and terrible and toxic leadership and start developing better leaders by using better leaders. So what do we do? One, I say we need to focus on character over charisma. Character is the key. You can't teach character, you can only observe character. How do you observe character? By seeing how people interact with others. See what they do when no one thinks they're looking. See what they do with certain aspects and tasks and missions or whatever it is. You will see a lot about that person based off their actions in certain scenarios and situations. We need to look at character over charisma. Charisma is fine. You want a good leader to have charisma, but you want them to have good character even more. We also have to look at potential over talent. A talented person could be great. They have a lot of skill. They're really good at Excel. They're really good at singing. They're really good at you fill in the blank. They're good at something, and they could be utilized to help better and improve your organization. Great. But here's the thing. I would rather take someone with potential and good character over someone with talent and terrible character. Someone who is potentially good at their job. They understand the fundamentals, but with more honestly, more training and more sharpening, based off of just the personality that they have this exude this great personality. I can teach potential. I can help shape them to be a better doer, but I can't teach them to be a better person. You can't teach that. People are either good or bad based on their own choices. You can have a very talented person with terrible character, just have them be a person who just completes tasks that with that talent and skill they have, but they shouldn't be in leadership. We need to look at empowering over tasking. Here's what I mean. It's so easy just to task someone to fire or forget and say, okay, here's this task, go do, and then forget about them. We need to look at how we empower people. How do you empower people? By giving them the freedom to fail, by giving them the freedom to win or lose. And you have to trust the process. Now, granted, you don't want to give them so much that when their failure destroys the organization. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about enough trust to let them learn and grow and develop. Empower your people to be creative. Empower people to be great leaders. You put them in leadership positions, small ones that don't overly affect the organization. And if they fail at it, that's where you reel them in, and that's where you develop and mentor good leaders. You can mentor people to be better leaders. Even the most high-tiered leader, a general, a pastor, a principal in a high school, a CEO needs mentorship. If they tell you they don't need mentorship, they're lying to you, and that's the kind of person that doesn't need to be in leadership. Because everybody, no matter what tier of leadership position or rank, needs mentorship, needs empowerment and good leadership. Identifying good leaders, we need good leaders that are inspirational, that inspire their people. If they're not inspiring their people, they're not inspiring the team, inspiring their coworkers, inspiring others, then they're probably not going to make a very good leader. A manager, maybe, but a leader, no. We need leaders that are more empathetic. And honestly, you can develop empathy to a certain degree. Some people are just very sociopathic and they're just only thinking about themselves. But I will say this, you can develop empathy. You have to get people to understand, to look outside themselves, to take a pause and stop with the tasks. Don't get so focused on your laptop in your office, in your dark office, in your room, and you're just focused on the spreadsheets and emails and phone calls and meetings that you forget other people. You forget to say, hey, how was your weekend? Hey, I heard your wife had a baby. How old, how much did she weigh? Great. How was the pregnancy? How was the birthing? What X, Y, and Z? Are you all sleeping okay? Asking questions, getting to know your team members is essential. If you're not willing to take a stop and breather and actually connect with the people you work with and get to know them, then what are you doing? Then why are you in leadership? Step away, go do something else. Go do something in a corner office where you don't have subordinates. Because not everybody should have subordinates. I don't think every manager, I don't think every person in position should have people under them because they're not ready to be leaders. And I'm not saying, well, we should just never let them be leaders. We should develop them to be leaders. We have to build into that. We can't just, okay, you made this position in rank or you've been in this for so many years. Here you go. Good luck. And hopefully no one hates you. No one falls apart in that. Hopefully, you don't get people that quit all the time. That's unfortunate. I see this in the military especially. People get promoted, they're thrust into leadership with very little to zero leadership development skills, and especially with empathy, they lack empathy entirely. And guess what? People leave. People don't re-enlist. They're quitting the military. I've seen so many people leave the military in this last couple of years than ever before. And I don't believe it's because the military in itself. I truly believe it's because of certain leaders they've worked with or worked under that have honestly skewed their idea of what the military looks like, which is quite unfortunate and sad. We need to also identify good leaders based off of, are they caring? Are they understanding? Do they care about people? Not about the mission. Yes, there's a time to care about the mission, but it's also a time to care about people. I was at a unit once when I was a sergeant, and I remember I had just gotten back from Japan. I was away from my family for a year, and I was at this unit who was getting ready to rotate to Korea, and they were like, okay, we need you to waive your dwell time. And I was like, why do I need to waive my dwell time? I just got back. And for those who don't know, dwell time is, if you're gone for a certain amount of time, you get a certain amount of time back. So it's for, if you're a combat tour, it's 1 month to 1 month. For unaccompanied tour, which is like Korea, Japan, places like that, it's 2 to 1. So I got 6 months for the year I was gone. Well, of course, I wasn't going to waive my dwell time because I just got back. I was away from my family for a year. That was quite rough. And this leadership in this unit was just like, well, we're getting ready to go to NTC. We're getting ready to go to Korea. We need you to be part of this team. Don't you care about the team? Isn't the team important to you? I'm like, I just got here. I don't even know y'all. But my thing is, why aren't you concerned about, hey, this soldier just got back from overseas. Let's take care of this soldier. I get it. You guys want to have as maximum amount of people to go to this rotation for training and for your numbers, and it makes you look good. Great. But what about the soldier? There's individual situations that need to be considered. And I remember that feeling of like no one cared. No one cared. It took me going to the chaplain and then going to my battalion commander at open door policy, because I went to my chain of command, I went to my supervisor, went to the first sergeant, went to the company commander, and they all kind of just blew me off and said, oh, well, figure it out. It took me going to my chaplain and going to the battalion commander to do open door policy and finally getting some kind of answer. He's like, well, okay, well, I need you to start looking for a position elsewhere if you can. We'll do a 1-for-1 swap. It took that, which was unfortunate. It shouldn't have taken that. I could have been rear detachment. They could have left me behind and said, okay, we're not taking this guy because he just got back. Let's take care of him and his family. Let's do that. Let's make sure that he's good, his family's settled, that he's not just a narcissistic of divorce and everything else, which, I got divorced from my ex anyways, but it wasn't because of that. Needless to say, no one thinks of those in leadership positions. I see this all the time in the military, especially. You saw this especially after the whole Vanessa Guillen, shenanigans that happened a couple years ago, where Fort Cavazos, Fort Hood at the time, their response was, well, people first. We need this people first initiative. And it's a great idea on paper. And I think it still can be a great idea. I think the verbiage and the idea of it does work, but there were so many knee-jerk responses where instead of, asking, hey, are we doing the right thing culturally wise in our organization? How can we better our culture? Instead, what they did is they just added layers of new nuance and tasks for the NCOs to do to take care of their soldiers, for people first. And there was like this thick binder of their soldiers book for each individual soldier, where they had to do this thing called the Golden Triangle, and call their mom, their best friend, and all these other things and ask questions. Well, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? And asking little questions like, well, that seems so superficial. We should be getting to know our soldiers regardless. And we should be given white space in our time as NCOs, as leaders, to get to know our soldiers. Now, granted, I was already doing that. I didn't need to do a people first initiative in a book to know my soldiers. I would invite my soldiers over for dinner all the time. I would host, chili cook-off at my house, or anytime there was a holiday, I'd always make sure that there was an empty spot at my table for any soldier who needed a place. So I wasn't that kind of leader that was needing a knee-jerk response like that. And I'm not saying I'm a perfect leader at all, but I know what good leadership looks like. And honestly, I'm going to tell you right now, good leadership looks like, being compassionate and empathetic, having that caring and serving heart, that servant leadership that so many of us are honestly neglecting. So many leaders neglect servant leadership. Leadership isn't about what you can get your team to do. It's what you can do for your team to be successful. That's what good leadership is. That's what servant leadership is. Isn't about you just getting the job done, but getting your people to believe in the job, to be passionate about their task, be passionate about the organization, to do things that honestly they didn't think they were able to do because you've inspired and empowered them to do so. That's what good leadership is. It's not about the position, about the rank, about, the role you have, the title you possess. It's about what you can do for other people. It's about what you can do to make your team successful. Not make you look good, but make your team successful and good and give them the credit. You should take no credit for your team. It should be, they did this. My team did this. That person did that. My person did this. And make sure they get recognized and propped up. We have to get away from being just task saturated with our own mindset, just doing the revolving door of how we live our lives, just kind of going through the motions. And we need to be focused on how we care for people, how we care for our subordinates, how we care for our team. That's what good leadership looks like. That's how we identify good leaders. But then we still have those negative leaders, right? We still have negative leaders in leadership. So what do? We have to be willing to prune them. And I'm not saying that we have to just kick them to the curb. We need to take them out of leadership roles. And I'm not saying forever. I'm saying until they can either be developed, and if they can't be developed, if they can't be retrained, if they can't be changed and remolded, then we should consider, well, they aren't best for this organization. Not everyone in leadership roles should be in leadership. We have to be willing to retrain and restore. Take them out of that position temporarily. Give them that tough talk. Hey, we've noticed this. Here, you are doing the X, Y, and Z. We want you to do A, B, and C. Here's how we can get here. Retrain them and then restore them back into leadership when the time is right. We need to prune leaders and do a reconditioning and reformation with leadership. We need to look at leadership in a different lens, a different viewpoint, a vantage point of leadership. Leadership isn't just managing and supervising. Leadership is motivating and empowering. We have to look at people in that aspect and reform them and recondition them to have a different view of their role in leadership. How we prune these leaders out is by better talent management. Just because they're in a position or rank doesn't mean we put them in leadership in front of people. We develop them, we understand them, we communicate with them, because leaders have leaders, right? So leaders, before you put someone in leadership, develop them, condition them, train them, help make them better, so that when you put them in that position, they're set up for success. We have to look at, honestly, a big one, not all doers are leaders. Just because someone gets a lot of jobs done right and they're really talented and skilled, that doesn't mean they're ready for leadership. That doesn't mean they need to be in leadership right away. We need to develop that better. And not all leadership positions are leaders. Not all people who have the position of leader doesn't mean they are a leader. They might be in a rank or position of high renowned. That doesn't make them a good leader. That doesn't make them a leader at all. It makes them a manager or supervisor. And not all managers and supervisors are leaders. You can supervise a segment or a system without being a supervisor of people. Does that make sense? We can develop people that don't, maybe they'll never have good leadership skills. We can still utilize their talents and skills to still help the organization and still help themselves, but not put them in a position where they're going to do more damage by putting them in leadership over other people. We have to be willing to do that. I think the military needs to work into this. We are pushing people into leadership roles that have honestly don't need to be in it, have no business being in leadership. But we're doing that. I see this in ministry. People are talented. They're great at preaching. They're pastors. Boom. And they shouldn't be pastors. They could be a preacher, a motivational speaker. But when it comes to like developing people and pastoring people, they suck at it. They are lacking tremendously on leadership skills to help pastor and mentor and counsel people. They're not doing that. They're good at organizational structures. They're good at preaching and being charismatic and drawing people in. But when it comes to that one-on-one personable thing, that personal thing, they're lacking that. So we have to reshape the way we see leadership, the way we see how we develop and choose people for leadership. So here's some lessons learned here is, why do we want to be in leadership? You should ask that question of yourself. I asked that question of myself too. I was asked that question. I remember my first promotion board. Why do you want to be a sergeant? Why do you want to be an NCO? And I was like, well, because I love soldiers and I love, being that leader who can help mentor them and shape them to be better versions of themselves. And I've always made sure I kept that at the forefront of every position I was in. Same thing as a warrant officer. I made sure that the reason why I became a warrant officer wasn't to necessarily just make more money as an officer, but to be a warrant officer meant that I get to help infect change. I get to help shift and motivate and empower people in a different way with a different influence. That's why I'm in leadership. That's why I'm in the position I'm in. That's why I do a podcast like this, to help empower people to be better versions of themselves. And then we have to really look at, differentiating toxic leaders versus disconnected leaders. I'm not saying that all leaders are toxic. I think there's leaders that are toxic and they create very toxic environments for their organizations and for their people. But there's also people who are very disconnected. If you're that leader that's just like, well, I'm not a toxic leader, but ask yourself this: are you a disconnected leader? Because you might not be toxic, but you might be disconnected. You might be the leader who is just, I'm working, my team's doing great, but are they? How do you know they're doing great? Do you communicate regularly? Do you talk to them? And I'm not talking to your direct subordinate, but their subordinates. How are they doing? When you look at leadership with that kind of lens, look at leadership as not just a position or status or rank, then you're going to be a successful leader. When you put leadership as a position of how do I serve others, you're going to be a great leader. But you know what? We need to rethink the way we do leadership. We need to look at how we develop ourselves and develop others to be better leaders. Anyways, I hope this podcast was helpful for you to kind of rethink leadership, to restructure leadership, but mainly to reform your thinking of leadership. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'm Coach AJ, and if you enjoyed content like this, make sure to subscribe down below. And if you know anyone who can benefit from a leadership coaching session like this, make sure to share this link as well. And if you have any questions or concerns about leadership, send me a comment. I would love to have a conversation with you as we develop leaders like you. And also, make sure to also hit the notification bell. That way you get updates of new content just like this. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you soon on another episode of Living Fully Fit with Coach AJ. Thanks for watching.